All right, welcome everyone to cybersecurity awareness programs. Just because they're aware doesn't mean they care. By myself, Anthony Green, and Penny with me. And before we get started with the presentation, we do want to introduce ourselves here. So I'll start with quickly introducing myself and I'll hand it off to Penny. So my name is Anthony. Now I have a few different hats right now. I'm currently full-time the manager of security operations and compliance at CPABC. I'm also the incoming president at the Osaka Vancouver chapter. And I'm also a part-time instructor at UBC teaching their cybersecurity micro-credential. And I'm teaching at VCC, the cybersecurity fundamentals. Penny, to you.
Yes, so hi everyone. I'm Penny Longman. I'm the Director of Information Security and Data Stewardship at Fraser Health. So I'm just finishing up my first year, and I don't know, in 2 or 3 more years, I'll have got a handle on all the medical acronyms that are the same as security acronyms. I'm new to the public sector as well, but I have a lot of experience in the private sector, mostly in mining and geoscience. I moved into security via IT, which was already a second career. So I bring a really broad background, having been on the outside as a customer of IT and security, as well as kind of, being here in the thick of it. So.
All right, and so I'll introduce our agenda a little bit today, and then I'll get right to the meat of it. So today we're going to talk about what is a security awareness program to start. Then we'll talk about why you should care and then why your employees should care. We're also going to talk about different types of learners. We're going to talk about how you can start creating a program yourself. And lastly, Penny's going to talk in detail about how you can mature your program and your culture. So once you've created that security awareness program, where do you go next with that? All right, and to get it started, what is a security awareness program? Well, a lot of people have different definitions. This definition is taken from the provincial government, and the definition says that the security awareness program consists of a formalized program with the goal of training users of potential threats to their organization and how to avoid situations that might put the organizational data at risk. So according to our own government here, in order to satisfy a security awareness program, you need to have the following. You need to have a documented program that is followed and updated regularly through policies. We need an annual information security for employees. And part of this annual information security, we need to ensure that we educate users on common threats and impact to businesses, such as not sharing credentials, not clicking on suspicious links and attachments, reporting security incidents, maintaining your clean desk, and locking any inactive systems. They should also be tailored for employee roles, and there should also be annual sign-off on the plan, meaning that all your employees should not only be doing it, going through the plan regularly on an annual basis, but also signing off to ensure that they actually have completed that training. So this is the more formal definition of a security awareness program. Now I want to talk to you about what a security awareness program means to me and Penny. So I believe that a successful security awareness program should be pushed from the top down, meaning from the board level, from the executive level, meaning that it shouldn't be your IT team begging the rest of the organization to take cybersecurity seriously, but it should be your organization leading your IT team to implement security technologies. Right? This is important because it's going to speed up your awareness program, speed up your entire security maturity very quickly if you get your executives on board. Now, staff actually need to understand that they are doing cybersecurity awareness training, right? How many times have you done some kind of awareness training with some staff? Maybe not even cybersecurity, maybe HR policy, and the staff are just clicking next, trying to get through it. And at the end of the day, they could see it as just a hindrance in their job. Oh, there's another hour that I have to spend doing some kind of training, right? Sometimes staff will just skip through that training and say they've done it. So we've noticed a lot of times when we ask staff, not within other organizations, we say, hey, did you do any cybersecurity awareness training? And they say, I don't think so. And then you talk to their manager and you say, well, here's the document they signed saying that they did the annual training this year, right? So make sure that they know that they're doing security awareness training and not just a regular kind of policy reminder. You also need to ensure you have tangible results based on your phishing simulations, and we'll talk about that in more detail. Phishing simulations, but essentially, you need to figure out a way to have tangible results when it comes to your security awareness. How do you know whether your organization's getting better or worse? This can be done with phishing simulations or even surveys. Staff should not be afraid of the security team, and we'll get to some stats about that later as well. But you do not want your staff to be afraid of reporting any security incidents to you. You would actually rather have your staff overshare than undershare, because you don't want staff to feel like if they accidentally got breached, even if it was by accident, you don't want them to be scared of you and therefore not reporting. And lastly, privacy and security have a lot of overlap. So this is a great time to do privacy awareness training at the same time as the security awareness training. There's a lot of things that you can just simply talk about the data more, and why you're doing what with the data. You know, what are the regulations that your organization might need to follow when it comes to that data. And now you're also you're also adding privacy to the security awareness program.
And in larger, sort of more mature organizations, you would actually have a formal security awareness and training program policy, which would give high-level guidance on when and how the training would be provided as an onboarding and then ongoing, how often the training is reviewed, who approves it, and the actual enforcement mechanism. And that policy would be endorsed and approved at sort of at an executive level. Can be less formal in other orgs, but in bigger orgs, it does tend to be really formal like that.
Thank you, Penny. Now I do want to talk about why you should care. So there's a few stats that even when I myself was reading them, I got quite surprised. And we're going to go over a lot of them today. And hopefully this will help you understand why there's such a lack of security, or how we know that there's such a lack of security awareness training in the average organization. Well, 20% of staff are unsure if they could describe the security risks with storing work information in personal cloud applications. So 1 in 5 staff can't tell you what's wrong with storing sensitive sensitive work documents on their personal Google Cloud, Google Drive, Dropbox. 43% of employees are not aware that clicking a suspicious link or opening an unknown attachment in an email is likely to lead to malware infection. So 4 out of 10 of your employees don't actually think twice when clicking on suspicious links or opening unknown attachments. A lot of them might think that if somebody has their email, then they obviously know this person, and we know that this is not the case. 55% are not convinced that connecting their laptop, smartphone, or tablet to public Wi-Fi network, such as a coffee shop or airport, can lead to malware infection. And as we know that public Wi-Fi, especially joining a random public Wi-Fi, can be a dangerous way, can be dangerous because it can lead to malware infections, man in the middle of attacks, things along those nature. As once you're on someone else's Wi-Fi, they can they have a lot more access to lead to trick you in different phishing attacks. Some employees are misinformed about cybersecurity risks. So 14% actually believe that if their computer or mobile device is kept close to a device that is already infected with malware, their device could also become infected with that same malware. So yes, this might be right when it comes to network. There's devices on the same network, but just because you have one iPhone sitting beside another iPhone doesn't mean that the virus will be able to transfer. That's actually very unlikely. But about 14% of employees actually believe that that is the case. 50% of employees said that they are very likely to report a security incident. Now, that is a very small number of people that are going to report a security incident. You would like to have that number above 90%. The reason being is that if there's a security incident, like I said earlier, you'd rather have your employees overshare than undershare, right? If somebody clicked on a malware, if they're comfortable letting the security team know, you, the security team could get, a head start on remediating that malware, or essentially isolating the user's computer from the network, right? The more data that your team has about the security incidents that are happening, or even potential security incidents that are happening in your organization, the better prepared your team will be to fight back or to remediate. And privacy best practices seem to be even less well understood than cybersecurity best practices. So 66% of staff did not know if their organization needs to be compliant with PCI DSS. And for those of you that don't know, any organization that takes any credit card information needs to be compliant with PCI DSS in some way or another. So 2/3 of all staff don't even know what compliances that their organization falls under. 69%, and the last stat here is 69% of employees don't believe that storing their personal data on their desktop and laptop computers, such as their mobile devices, can create a policy violation. So again, just like the previous slide here, um, most staff don't know why data needs to stay within your organization. They don't understand the risks of taking data outside of your organization. So you need to care that the staff, this is why you need to care that staff should be learning about cybersecurity awareness, so that you don't have as many gaps like that within your organization.
And so, why should they care, right? Something to keep in mind. There's three three fundamentals to creating a cyber safe culture. So first, we have to make people aware. That's the core of the program, right? But you have to make them care, because people don't act without motivation. Now that motivation can be extrinsic. We can like make them do it, but our long-term goal is to make that intrinsic, because then they will care. We need to make them aware of the issues, but we also need to make them aware of the role that they can play, which leads to them, investing and caring. But there's a last step, which I'm just getting you to think about here in sort of the beginning. I'll talk about it later, is that we actually have to also make sure that they can easily do the right thing, right? Because they can be aware and they can care. But if it's a lot of friction for them to do the right thing, they're still not going to do it, because they have a job to do, right? You can't make them fear doors, but still expect them to, turn up inside the building.
Yeah, user experience can be sometimes just as important as the actual security tool themselves. Users are a lot smarter than they even know, let's just say, when it comes to getting around security loopholes.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention is why you should care under the compliance section. So security awareness or security awareness program management is actually a requirement for many, if not most, cybersecurity compliance frameworks. I've listed a few here. There's a few that I haven't listed, but essentially, if you look through all of them, Cybersecure Canada, PCI DSS, SOC 2, SOX, HIPAA, ISO, COBIT, these are all really big, these are the most well-known compliance frameworks. And if you actually look through the requirements, they're all very similar when it comes to employee awareness training. If you create a security awareness program that fits all the requirements that we talked about on the first or second slide by the BC government, and we'll come back to that later. If you create a program that fits those requirements, you will actually be able to hit most of these compliancy requirements, right? So PCI DSS, for example, needs you to educate employees, but also require employees to acknowledge in writing, right? Again, this is the formalized annual and onboarding trainings, and then the annual sign off, right? If you go to the SOC 2, you need to communicate information to improve security knowledge and awareness. Um, Again, same thing can be used for SOC 2. The same program can be used for SOC 2 and PCI DSS. The main things that they all have in common here is they educate employees. They need some kind of formal acknowledgement, so you need a sign off. And the last thing is that a lot of it, if possible, needs to be role based, meaning that you might want to do more intense security awareness training for your IT team versus the your communications team, because your IT team might have much more access to critical assets, while your communication team might only have access to the minimum amount of user information that they need for their job, right? So creating a security awareness program isn't going to only make your organization more secure, and potentially stop some of these stats that we were mentioning, or at least lower them, but it's also going to make sure that you hit the compliances that you're most likely required to in some form or another, either way. Now, your goal for security awareness shouldn't be to just trick your staff, or sorry, well, your goal when you're doing phishing training or security awareness isn't to throw as much information at them as possible, right? You can send them papers, you can send them white papers, you can send them a lot, you can even send them on a course. But the most important thing is to change their mindset about cybersecurity, right? Cybersecurity, as the manager of security, cybersecurity isn't actually my job. I'm just curating the cybersecurity of the organization. Cybersecurity is every single staff's job, right? Every single staff should have that in mind. And that's what you want to train your staff with the security awareness training. You're essentially changing your staff's mindset to, um, we can do whatever we want. We got a security team that's gonna, if we get hacked, they've got these antivirus and this firewall. They'll figure it out. Two, we are the first line of defense, right? The staff is the first person that's going to be able to stop this phishing attack. And for those of you that may not know, these days, I believe over 98% of attacks start with phishing. So you don't need to let the fish get all the way to the antivirus or all the way to your firewall. You can get the fish to stop right from your email service, right from when your staff notices it. They can fish it. What does that mean? Well, you can fish it. You can. We'll talk about this in more detail about the stuff you can actually implement, but you can actually implement a fish alarm. So every time there's a phishing email, you can get your staff to report it and have it sent to your security team. Once your security team is able to monitor those phishing emails, they can then make decisions. For example, if we get this very sneaky phishing email from one of our CEOs, or an impersonation email from a CEO, we can take a look at that, say, oh yeah, this is definitely a fish. And then we can run a script to actually get rid of that from everybody else's inbox in our organization. So that first person that fished it essentially got rid of that malicious email for the entire organization, right? Didn't even need to get past our, maybe sandbox or antivirus, you name it. Additionally, if staff have this mindset where cybersecurity is their job, with this informed mindset, they can actually help spot unsecure processes and hopefully work with your team to fix it, right? So if they're not scared of the security operations team, they'll work with the security operations team to fix their insecure processes, right? Meaning that, let's take two organizations, for example, one that isn't security aware, one that is. One that isn't security aware, maybe they're sending out emails with personally identifiable information, right? That's not encrypted. But if they find out that that's not secure, they're a non-security aware organization will just try to hide that under the rug. They'll say, okay, well, don't tell the security guys. They're going to make our lives a lot harder, right? Versus a security aware organization, they're going to come to me and say, hey, this is how we're currently doing the emails. Is this secure? If not, how can we make this process more secure. And hopefully, if you're doing your annual cybersecurity awareness training, around shortly after the training is when most staff will come to you and say, hey, these are the processes that we have. Can you help us secure them? We talked about reporting phishing emails. And yeah, last thing that I want to mention is staff are not afraid of reporting security events. So, meaning a little bit of customer service goes a long way. If somebody sends you an email, hey, is this a phish? Hey, I think I clicked a malicious link. As the security team, you want to be very supportive. You want to thank them for letting you know. You want to get them to the point where they almost feel like, well, you don't want them to almost feel like, you want them to feel like you and them are partnering up to fix an issue. It's not, security isn't coming in to fix their mess, but they maybe made a mistake, and security is coming in to help them mitigate the risk of their mistake. You want them to feel comfortable asking your security team. You want your staff to feel safe reaching out to your security analyst or manager, rather than feel stressed out, worried that there's going to be consequences and stuff like that to their job. So, a little bit of customer service goes a long way to make sure that staff are not afraid of reporting any security events.
Yeah, and as I said, this can be a bit of a change for your security team's mindset. I like to joke that we used to be, but we're not the department of no. Now we're the department of please, no. And it's going to be a change in the mindset. It's hard sometimes for more hardcore security teams to step back from the stern parent kind of mindset. Your team has to view themselves as part of the solution and not the arbiter of good and bad and right or wrong, and that can be a bit of their own sort of security culture shift as well.
Exactly. You do not want to be known as the office of no. So now let's talk. Now we talked about security awareness, the importance of security awareness. Let's talk about how we can implement security awareness within our organizations. Now, excuse me. Before we get into details of that, we need to talk about how we can make it successful. And before we do that, we need to understand the type of learning that the type of learners that most people are, most users. And obviously, there's different methodologies that you can use. I personally like to use this one because it keeps it simple, the rule of three. Visual. So we've got staff that use visual objects like infographics, charts, pictures, network diagrams, process flows that help people understand. Then we have auditory, retain information through hearing and speaking. We have staff that this would be stuff like podcasts, videos, stuff along those lines. And lastly, we have kinesthetic. And kinesthetic essentially likes to use the hands-on approach to learn new material. We have a lot of those, especially in the IT department or in the IT area. But again, security awareness isn't just for IT, it's for everyone. So it's important to understand the types of learners that you have, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, in order to be able to reach them in the most efficient way. Right? And I want to talk just a little bit more about this before we move on. With a visual learner, it's really a lot of the things that you can get, and we'll talk. There will be, I think, some links later on, but this would be stuff like security awareness graphics, maybe a PSA, maybe a quick update about what's going on in the industry, right? If, for example, when LifeLabs or the CRA got hacked, you can send a little picture information, a little infographic about how it got hacked, why it got hacked, and that would do a lot more for these visual learners than the same information in email format, right? Podcast, you can read out that entire infographic and turn it into a 2-minute podcast or 2-minute listening piece, and now you've hit the visual and auditory learners. And kinesthetic, we'll talk about that later, but there's a few ways that you can actually test your users' security awareness with the kinesthetic method. So how do we start doing it now? And ideally, for free? Well, I have a whole bunch of tools that you can use to get at least the basics started. The first tool is the phishing awareness tool, phishing reporting tool. So this tool will allow you to monitor phishes from the that the organization receives. So you can look at the picture, see at the in your email box, you would have a little phishing alert button where if you clicked it, it would go to a special inbox that hopefully your security team monitors. Next, you want to find a baseline. So you want to send a simulated phishing test to see how your organization does. This baseline is going to be now. It's okay if you get a lot of clicks. This baseline is meant to see your improvement, not where you're at right now. Going forward, you'll be doing different baseline tests to ensure that you've improved. But even if your first one has a really high click rate, don't feel discouraged. Then you want to run monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, whatever your organization size, whatever works, but you want to create phishing campaigns. So phishing campaigns essentially is a fake fish that you send out on your organization's behalf to actually see how well your staff would have caught it or fell for it. Now, going back one step, for a phishing reporting tool, there's a free one called Know Before. They have a free add-on you can install that sends that to a phishing inbox. For the baseline and running bi-monthly phishing campaigns, I suggest using Trend Micro. So Trend Micro Fish Insights, I believe that's the full name. It'll allow you to actually do free security awareness training for up to 200 users. So when I say free training, I mean free phishing training. So you will be able to fish up to 200 users on a monthly basis, and they actually have some great templates you can use. That's a great place to start. Then you can move on to spear phishing. So pretend you are your department head, right? Um, if you're phishing the IT team, you take the IT director's email and pretend to be the IT director and see the difference between the clicks there and the general phishes. And then ideally, you're looking for patterns, you're validating your results, and you're creating harder phishes as you go because what you want is your goal isn't to trick your staff, your goal is to educate them. And what's the difference? Well, the difference is when you're tricking your staff, there's a whole bunch of sneaky things you can throw in, right? You know, there's a once in a million, once in a lifetime fish that you'll get that's probably undetectable to most people. But 99.9% of fishes all have very common indicators. And what you need to do is you want to get your staff to be as comfortable with those indicators as possible so that they don't get fished by that 99.99% of phishing emails, right? Such as hover over the hyperlink, check who it's from, right? What's the tone of the message, right? Stuff like that. Excuse me. And the last thing I want to talk about here under awareness is your cybersecurity and awareness presentation. This should be a yearly thing on onboardings as well as something on multiple fails on phishing tests. So if you have someone that failed 3 tests in 1 year, maybe you want to send them to some training. And here's a little example program that you can take a look at. That's a great way to start. As you know, for an SMB, it's a great way to get your feet wet when it comes to security program. You start with the seminars, and you're doing quarterly fish with your testing. I forgot to mention this testing. So the phishing campaign testing, that's the best way for kinesthetic learners to learn. And I have a slide about that, and just actually it's the next one. But finishing with this slide, green. You start with the greens. Once you're happy with that, you move and add yellow to it. So now you're fishing on a bi-monthly, as well as you've added Lunch and Learn and an October Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And then once you get to red, now you're doing monthly phishing campaigns. You're also adding quarterly infographics. You're doing spear phishing, and you're doing Cybersecurity Month in October. So this is a great way to build out your SMB to at least start creating a security awareness program. So phishing tests. I did mention we're not trying to trick, we're trying to educate. So it's very important to have a oops page. Once you've clicked the link, where does it take the staff? And how are you going to inform the staff of how not to click the link going forward? So in this case, this is a template from Know-Before. However, you can also just do this in Microsoft Paint with some little text boxes if you need to. That's what I used to do before. But essentially, what you want to do is you want to highlight all the different areas that the user could have looked at in order to have not gotten phished so they can learn that next time. And it's nice to have a little tagline. Ours is when in doubt, fish it out. Easy to remember. And we keep repeating it. So let's bring it all together. How does a security awareness program look? Well, it has yearly an awareness training where we educate users on policies and why. And this usually is our auditory and visual training. Then we've got our monthly phishing campaigns, and our goal is to educate, not to trick. This can be done. This is a kinesthetic learning type, and we can do this for free from Trend Micro. Then we also want to be adding supplementary content, infographics, webinars, PSA. Whenever you have a great idea or you think your organization, maybe even lunch and learns, right? If you have any other content ideas, just remember about the auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, right? You want to have a mix of all three. If you're doing a whole bunch of infographics, maybe you want to go for a podcast or a lunch and learn, right? And the last thing is Cybersecurity Month. And Cybersecurity Month is a well-known month for the entire industry. This is usually more common for SMBs, not necessarily larger organizations. And I'll let Penny explain why afterwards. But essentially, with a Cybersecurity Month, you are aiming to actually do a little bit of everything and try to get staff to it's essentially a campaign. It's a marketing campaign. So this is, you're thinking like marketing here, where this is a full month dedicated to cybersecurity. Maybe you download a theme from a security awareness provider like InfoSec Institute. These can be online for free. You can find these online for free. You also want to have a lunch and learn where you can present a trending security topic and provide some information. In October, it's a great month to present a topic around the lines of how to stay safe shopping online. You can also run a contest, so that way you get more people fishing your fishes, or yeah, using your fish report on your phishing email. If there's a chance they can win some money. Make it personal. Don't only repeat your policy or in the lunch. That it's about make sure that it's about keeping yourself safe online rather than just the corporate organization. Because if people are thinking of their cybersecurity at home, probably take it well. And lastly, you want to inform them of progress. You want to let staff know of the collective improvement. And then Penny, can you just give us a quick second why this might not scale as well in a larger organization, specifically the Cybersecurity Month?
Yeah, so it's because I work at Fraser Health, and as you might know, there's a month for everything, right? There's a month for cancer, and they're all equally well. They're all very important. So it's just a situation where that kind of theme doesn't work. And sometimes in larger orgs, again, there's a whole lot of competing priorities. But in many situations, it's a great thing. There's often a lot of material out there already for you to use. But yeah, sometimes in large orgs, you just have to get a little more creative because, just because of the size of the org and the formality of the processes.
Thank you. And the last thing that I want to bring it up for creating the security awareness program before I hand it off to Penny here is, remember that first slide that we looked at about what the government of BC considers a security awareness program? Well, if we create that if we document it, formalize that policy, and make sure that it's updated regularly, we got that. Annual information security for employees. We do that annual awareness training. we hit the second point. We make sure our annual awareness training has all the things that the government wants or other potential compliancy standards. We're good there too. We tailor it for the employee's roles, such as more in-depth training for IT admins. Now we get a check mark there. And at the end of their session, at the end of the yearly awareness training, we get their signature to get the annual sign off. And now we've essentially created a security awareness program that fits the goals of our own government, as well as most compliancy programs, security compliancy programs that are out there specifically. Now, once you've done this, what are the next steps? And that's where Penny will take over here.
Yeah, so thanks, Anthony. So you've got Anthony's given a great comprehensive overview of all the parts of a program and sort of what you need to do to be in compliance with most of those frameworks. Now I'm going to present some thoughts on how you can take that up a level or two in it. It could be because you've already got the basics and you want to take the next step, or because you're maybe in a really big org and you kind of really need to scale it up. So excuse me, I'm getting over a bit of a respiratory, so I'm drinking and coughing a lot. My apologies. So either way, a fully mature program has 4 parts. So formal customizable training, ongoing dynamic fish training, various and varied outreach, and a formal, managed, and up-to-date themed calendar of events. And all of those are things that Anthony sort of already talked about. So next slide, let's start with formal training.
Sorry.
There
we go.
We're a team here. So this is what when you say security awareness and training, this is what most people think of, right? It's the meat of the meat and potatoes, but this is actually the scaffolding of the whole program. It's not the whole meal deal. There's a couple parts of it. So everyone needs some sort of introduction to your organization's security during onboarding, right? Honestly, a mature program would have that actually quite basic, because you're going to also have ongoing training where you can flesh things out, where it's going to be more relevant, but we'll talk about that in a minute. 2 key things to think about in your onboarding. Can you pre-test the person to determine what training they need to meet your onboarding requirements? Can they just challenge the quiz? Why should a brand new security analyst have to answer all 6 modules of the basic cyber safe training, right? Some platforms do have that. And I will tell you, in a mature program, it's a really good idea to build goodwill. Onboarding training can be really long and boring, so reductions wherever possible can help. And secondly, and this is similar to what Anthony's talked about, a program in general, an intern doing internet research needs really different onboarding than a volunteer greeter, right? Than the developer, the CFO. And your tool should allow you to create groups, and this is often done through AD integration in more mature platforms, so that you can choose the relevant modules for the specific job roles. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important this is in generating goodwill. People that way don't feel like they're standing there wasting their time reading a clean desk policy when their job doesn't actually have a desk, right? For your ongoing training, in its functional form, that's yearly training, a presentation, a course, or a program. When you're getting to a mature system, for your ongoing training, most people assume, okay, every year they'll just do the same modules. Well, that can be really boring, and it can actually be kind of pointless, because, as Anthony said, people will find a way to invest as little as possible and that'll defeat the purpose of it. You'll get your checkbox for your compliance, but compliance checkboxes are only part of what keeps security professionals up at night, right? It's the actual fact that they need the training, as Anthony said. So far better is what I call drip training. Now, I don't know if that's an industry term. I don't think I made it up, but I'm running with it anyway. So what it means is that employees, on an ongoing basis, they do their onboarding. Ongoing, they'll get an email or some prompt, could totally be through Slack or whatever other asynchronous communications, that directs them to this month's training, which should be a 3 to 7 minute chunk of training. If you're using a sort of more formal platform, most of them will have modules that are about that size, and that'll be this month's module, and it should tie into some other to a theme or some other activities you're doing in your program. We'll talk about that in the calendar ideas. So, and that's their task for the month. And then next month, or whatever cadence you choose, they'll get the next installment. And so throughout the period of the year, they'll have covered all of the required training. If they have outstanding modules that they haven't done, then those have to be finished up for their, for their compliance. So this keeps it interesting. They can do the courses at their leisure or all at once. Just gives people a lot of flexibility and gives you org flexibility if you have people in really different, job roles. So also in more mature organizations, how do you enforce this? Well, as I said, you've got your executive approved security awareness and training policy, which says, some training we've done on onboarding. You'll have exec buy-in. Specifically, you'll have exec buy-in that the completion be tracked and reported. And again, most platforms will allow you, especially if you have like AD integration, to be able to track and report back. But it also needs to be tied back into your year-end performance reviews, right? I have to have my fire safety training done. I also have to have my security training done before the end of my review year. And that's one of the most common. So many other training things are tied into that. Let's use the same thing for our security training. Lastly, you have a plan for the training, but if you just have an event where somebody goes and plugs in a USB stick and your security team spends 3 days cleaning up malware, your program needs to be able to respond to that. You need to be able to pull that in. You need to have some stuff in reserve about USB so you can put it out there with that month's batch training, because everything's context dependent. And, as Anthony said, there's different kinds of learners. That sort of experiential learner of like, oh my goodness, I remember so-and-so that happened, right? That makes it a lot more current. And you do need to be able to respond to that, because that's going to just make it all that much more real for everyone and make them just see a little bit more value. So, okay, so you got your formal training set up. Now you're going to look into maturing your fish training. So next slide. One of the elements of a fully mature program is, and Anthony alluded to this even sort of in the initials, is it's potentially asynchronous, especially if you're a larger divorce organization, right? You need to be able to send potentially different fishes to different groups, but also your platform needs to be able to create dynamic groups based on responses to phishing. So you need to, if a group fails a fish test, you need to be able to resend a fish test to that group. And in larger orgs, you can't do that manually. You have to be able to say, okay, everyone who failed this, make a group, and we're going to resend a fish to them. Then if you can, that dynamic grouping, you can then, if those of that group that pass, you can generate a lot of goodwill by sending them an email saying, hey, did you know we sent you another fish and you caught it? So congratulations. And that can generate a lot of goodwill, because people often have a lot of baggage when they fail. And then again, it will also allow you, especially if your fish training and your security training are tied in, you can actually create a group from that of the people who failed the second time and direct them specifically towards some training as well. But these groups need to be able to be dynamically. Fraser Health, we have 40,000 people. I can't, my team can't be manually sort of, managing these things. And then your decisions need to be data driven. You need to see if your training is working. You need to know if maybe certain groups are more vulnerable to fish, certain kinds of fishes on the night shifts, right? That's really, really relevant. When you have a large org, you have to start focusing in on those kinds of things. So, and it means your reporting will change over time as well. Some platforms have robust reporting, but sometimes you also have to export it depending on what other attributes you want. But that is going to have to change over time, because your executive are going to get more mature in the detail that they want to see as well. So okay, so you've got fishing and training maturing as we go. What are some other tools that we can use? So there's lots of options, but the keys are to make sure, first of all, that they're custom. You need to hack whatever you see and make sure it works in your org. So anything that you see in a book or on slides, you need to use that as a placeholder for what you're going to develop, right? You can't just parrot stuff across. And in the same vein, it has to be authentic. If it looks like you're just repasting stuff from Microsoft's website or running a canned webinar, your staff aren't going to be impressed, and they're not going to be engaged, right? All of this has to provide them some value. Fishing, training, they're obliged to do that. Attending your programs, participating in your context and all, that has to provide them with something tangible, or they simply won't engage, right? Really useful, actionable information. Hey, here's about password managers. That's the sort of thing. Swag is also something that you can provide them. We're human, right? At Fraser, we have these cool mugs that say passwords are like coffee, not for sharing. We also have socks that say socks are like passwords. You always need more than one. We're just totally going with the sort of cheesy nerd line. So, and to give away, I have a little stack of tiny notepads that say, don't write your password here. To which my adult children, I always forget the password for our Wi-Fi. And then when guests come, I have to ask them. So they actually took one of these, wrote our Wi-Fi password on, then laminated it. And that's what I have to hand to staff. So I don't know why other people take me seriously, because my children evidently don't. But anyway, that's an aside. Security champions, this is one of my favorites. It's great, but you have to have a formal program for this. You can't wing it, right? The security team, because it's complicated, they have to get something from you, more training, swag, kudos, and we have to get something from them. They have to get our messages out to the teams. But there's another sort of element of the two-way street that we need. They have to bring information back to us so that we better understand what their segment of the organization needs. So, wow, those mugs are great, but they're really heavy for kids, if that's relevant. Or wow, everyone really appreciated that email last night, but the night shift kind of didn't understand it because it's really not relevant to their work. Or hey, that article on password managers, it's great for most of us, but a lot of our ESL people struggled to understand it. So we might just want to rephrase that a little bit. We need our ambassadors, champions, whatever you call them, to help us change our security, to help us change security culture. But they also need to bring things back to help us change our security program. And that's why there's lots of resources out there in security champions programs. I won't even begin to most of mine is anecdotal. But so I won't go into too much detail here, but remember, it can be a really fun and rewarding part. So don't leave it out, but it can't be your first step, because it's not as simple as it seems. So one of the other things, content, right? If you have a website that has constantly changing content that's relevant, that's another thing that you can use to drive engagement. If you have an internal comms or intranet team, you actually want to use all the tricks from your intranet group, because you want to make sure it's new content. From a security perspective, you have to make sure that there's no stale content and there cannot be incorrect content or out of date content, or you'll lose all credibility. So, but that's another one. One day I'll have to do a whole session on different outreach options, but for now, there's often a lot of talks about this sort of thing, a lot of conferences. One suggestion I can say is, if you're a large enough org to have a marketing department, and Anthony alluded to this, talk to your marketing department, because they're used to marketing outside. Ask them to work with you to market inside, right? And they actually find it quite interesting. So one of the things they will tell you to probably create, as will your intranet team, is to create a calendar. So for the next slide, this is where you set a theme for each cadence, right? You match up your articles, your blogs, your training, and then you're planning ahead. So what I've done is, here's all the difference we have, our overall theme, and then we have our blog, and we have our webinar, and we have our email tagline, and we have what outreach are we doing, what training are we giving to specific groups. And then that way, for each month, you can just figure out everything that's relevant for that month, and base it back to the theme. So it just allows you to plan ahead, and it gives you a structure. I also have categories for my articles, like definitions, real life, which is, what's it like in our org, and general. And every now and then I just make up a bunch of topics, fit them into those categories, and then in my calendar I alternate between the three categories. So all I have to do is find definitions topic that's about frontline workers, and boom, I have my topic for the time. So it's just a kind of a way to hack what can be a really large issue. So and when you have all this, it doesn't look like it's done by frantically understaffed security analysts. So next slide. So the elephant that's in the room is that a lot of this can actually be leading horses to water, like we talked about, right? All this effort can make them aware. And we talked about awareness of the issues, but also awareness of the power that they have, that your users have to protect against the issues. But it's not necessarily going to make them care unless you have that as a central tenet of your program, right? I'm aware that jaywalking is a crime, right? But if I think the road looks clear, I don't care about, I'll do it, because there's really no consequence unless I get caught, and I don't see any cops. But if I see a little kid, right, I'm often not going to jaywalk, because there's a real reason not to. That kid could copy me and run out, So suddenly I care about that, because there's a relevance to me, and so I'm going to make better choices, right? So what can I do to protect my organization, which is everyone around me as well as myself? But then the next step is, can they actually do that? Just because they're aware and then they care, are they in a position to always make the right choice? So this means embedding security in the way we approach a lot of things. For instance, your DLP stops them from sending certain files by email. Great. But you also, at that point, have to make sure that they're then informed how to send those files safely, right? Because when was the last time, if ever, that information was presented to them? Maybe at their onboarding a year ago. It's not going to pop into mind. So can we have that info be part of the message that tells them they're not allowed to do that, right? The organization does not allow this to happen. Here's how you can send files. It has to be presented in context. And yeah, that's a very specific ask to your IT department, right? And that is the key to the cultural shift. That's the key to a real cyber safe security culture. It's that second order effect, right? Your IT department has to be invested in security like the average user, but also in the implementation of their work. So they're not just worried about them not clicking on USBs, but they're also going to hear your request and go, oh, wow, yeah, that makes total sense. We need to do that because that's going to make everything that much more secure. So we have to get, and that's what I mean by that second order effect. Everyone has to care. Everyone has to be making the right choices, but the whole organization also has to be working to make sure that people can make the right choice when they are. Because as we know at the coalface, it's all about friction. So people will take the easiest path. Next slide. And we will. And people will be doing their job. They're going to do what they need to do their job, right? And do their job faster and better. And that statement, that's benign, not critical in any way, because I jaywalk. But it's critical to creating that cyber safe culture. It's not just those first order things like people using safe file transfer methods, but also needing to permeate the culture so we don't do things like this. We can't just have security saying not allowing people to do things. We need to be creating an environment where making the right choice is the easier choice to make so that we don't end up with things like this picture on the screen. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Penny. All right. So now I know we do have some questions. Let me just get out of the screen here. And we'll see what we can answer here.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the. Well, apparently we should. Anthony, apparently we should give a lot of food as well. Apparently, food's a good choice. So.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So just one question I wanted to answer quickly, just because I know that one will be easy to answer. Would it be possible to get a copy of these slides to refer back to later? Feel free to reach out to myself on LinkedIn if you want an actual copy of them. However, this event is recorded and will be posted on YouTube, so you will be able to reference this whenever you'd like.
Anthony, can I answer one question here or one comment here? So I see a couple of times people have said, security is not everyone's job. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch that, but yes. And in more sort of the next level of some of the conversations I was having is that you as a security team, but not even as a security team, as an organization, if you can do the thing so that the user never has to be given the choice, absolutely, that's the next step to take, right? So if we can make it so that if they try to put the stuff in their email, it routes it securely, and then it's not an issue. Absolutely, we want to get there, but we're not there yet, and not everything can be done that way. So I totally agree, and I will go back and watch that presentation. But that's in many cases a level of maturity that I think a lot of organizations aren't necessarily at yet. So,
agreed. Yeah, we haven't had a chance to look at all the questions as we were speaking. Another question we have, and this one's probably closer for Penny. In a security awareness program, say for 2 to 3 years, we developed and given training on various topics like phishing, malware, passwords, especially for existing non-technical people. How do we make it more interesting after 2 to 3 years? Because existing staff would have gained information about common awareness topics.
Yeah, you know what? If you don't have a champions program, I would say that's definitely an opportunity to get some of your security champions to design some training that's a little bit more really focused on sort of what they've learned as they've gone along. That I think just ties back into needing to make it constantly updating it as well, and develop, again, I don't know what your budget is, but develop some contests or treasure hunts, whatever, where all of the things that they need to learn about passwords they have to actually put into practice in certain environments. So there's lots of things, but it all just ties back to that thing of having to just be changing it up every year, and maybe having one stream for the newer people and another stream for the people who've been there longer, maybe where they can just even challenge the quiz and not necessarily have to do the training. So I think we might be at our time.
Yeah. I think are we moving to another session task to answer more questions, Ashley? Just want to confirm, because I know another speaker is coming on in just a minute here. All right. I think in that case, we'll just have the next speaker hop on. If you have any questions, absolutely feel free to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn. Probably an easier way to get in touch with us. And from there, I guess we'll pass it on to your next presenter here.